Welcome back, fellas. So, it's the Impulse Gundam's mech analysis this video. The ZGM-FX56S Impulse is a prototype Gundam mobile suit manufactured by Zaft 2 years after the events of Gundam Seed, in late Cosmic Era 73. Zaft created a new series of advanced prototype mobile suits known as the Second Stage series to succeed their previous generation of Gundams, which were all lost in the First Alliance Plant War. The ZGM-FX56S Impulse Gundam was one of these machines. The machine was first seen during the Armory 1 raid incident orchestrated by Phantom Pain, where it attempted, but failed to stop the theft of its 3 second-stage series siblings, and later failed the further attempts to recapture them. However, the Impulse performed well against all of its deployments, from the Break the World incident to the battle off of Orb's coast. Then there was the skirmish in the Indian Ocean, where it not only destroyed a sizable squad of advanced Windams, but it also destroyed a base that was under construction near Zaft's Carpentaria base. The machine was vital to the Gulnahan operation, as well as the battles of Dardanelles and Crete. Amongst those incidents, the machine was pivotal to destroying numerous battleships, mobile suits, and, most notably, the stolen ZGM-FX-31S Abyss Gundam. Aiding in the successful recapture of the ZGM-FX-88S Gaia Gundam. And its biggest feat was being responsible for destroying the ZGM-FX-10A Freedom Gundam during Operation Angel Down, after its initial pilot, Shin Asuka, received the new ZGM-FX-42S Destiny Gundam. The Impulse was reassigned to Luna Maria Hawk. Luna Maria first piloted the Impulse during Operation Ragnarok, which consisted of the invasion of Heaven's Base in Iceland, where it assisted Shin's Destiny and Rei's ZGM-FX-666S Legend Gundam in defeating the base's GFASX-1 Destroy Gundams. The Impulse was heavily damaged at the end of the Second Alliance Plant War in the Battle of Messiah by Atherin Zala's ZGM-FX-19A Infinite Justice Gundam. The damaged Impulse was later recovered and secretly upgraded into the ZGM-F56E2 Impulse Gundam Spec 2 and stored in an underground hangar at Orb's Akatsuki Island. I think I'll do a separate video for the Spec 2. So, we bring an end to the machine's operational history. Now, onto the tech specs. So, as stated earlier, the Impulse Gundam is part of Zaft's second stage project, which was devised to refine and improve mobile suit technologies while being compliant with the stipulated restrictions of the Junius Treaty, signed after the First Alliance Plant War. The ZGM-FX-56S Impulse Gundam is a multi-role unit similar in concept to the Earth Alliance's GATX-105 Strike Gundam. The Impulse was designed simultaneously with Zaft's new battleship, the LHM-BB-01 Minerva, which included a catapult exclusive for its use. Using this smaller catapult, the Impulse launches with its modules divided, while combining mid-flight, to cope with one of the main clauses of the Junius Treaty that barred the installation of nuclear engines on mobile suits, and to further supplement this new battery-powered mobile suit initiative. Another new piece of technology was designed. This would be the Deuterium Beam Energy Transfer System, which allows a suit of the second stage series like the Impulse to immediately recharge its battery by receiving energy through a deuterium beam from a ship equipped with this system. But unlike the other units in this series, which have a secondary mobile armor mode to aid in their combat effectiveness in a certain environment, the Impulse Gundam was not designed for combat in a specific environment. Instead, it was designed to adapt to different combat situations by using optional back-mounted equipment known as silhouettes. The reason for this was from the assessment of battle records during the previous Alliance Plant War, where after the introduction of the advanced G-Project machines and their successors fielded by both sides, there were signs pointing to many battles in the First Alliance Plant War were weighed greatly by the skill of a single ace pilot and a correspondingly powerful mobile suit. The combat records of Kira Yamato and the GATX-105 Strike Gundam during the early to middle stages of the previous war attested to this, and Zaft wanted a high-performance suit that could perform various roles to give the ace pilot the ability to operate in many different situations. The use of silhouettes also allowed ZAF to get around the restrictions placed on mobile suit number by the Junius Treaty. And the packs themselves can be switched out mid-battle as they are transported by an automated unit known as the Silhouette Flyer System. Another unique feature of the Impulse Gundam is that it is made up of 3 different modules. The main module is the small transformable fighter plane, the YFXM-56 S-Core Splendor, which contains the suit's cockpit. The other modules are the leg flyer and chest flyer, and they can be easily replaced if damaged or destroyed, enabling the suit to stay in combat longer. The Impulse Gundam is in its modular form when on standby or undergoing maintenance. As such, it can only be stored and launched from the Minerva, which has a specialized hangar and catapult designed for the suit. The 3 modules will combine in midair after launch, and then the Impulse Gundam will receive the silhouette from the Silhouette Flyer. The Impulse also used the new variable phase shift armor, which is more energy efficient, and its strength, as well as color, can be changed in the field, although this must be programmed beforehand. The VPS armor allowed a pilot to adjust the machine's armor defenses to match their combat style. But in the case of the Impulse, where depending on the silhouette module equipped, the armor color will change to the most ideal armor settings to suit the machine's equipment and weapons. So, speaking of the weapons, we'll move on to those now. The Impulse had a rather basic selection of weapons. Firstly, we have the MMIGAU 25A 20mm CIWS. The Impulse has 2 physical projectile-firing CIWS guns installed in its chest, and they have excellent rapid-fire capabilities. They are primarily used to intercept incoming missiles or enemy units, and to restrict enemies' movements. They are also capable of penetrating ordinary mobile suit armor in extreme close range. And then there's the M71 AAK folding razor model anti-armor knife. For close combat, the Impulse is equipped with a pair of knives which are stored in the side skirt armor when not in use. These knives are developed based on the data of the GATX-105, Strike Gundam's combat knives. The knife's high-hardness blade flips out of the handle during use, and can vibrate to enhance cutting capabilities. It can pierce through most armor, except PS armor and its variants, and does not draw power from the suit. And now we move on to the optional armaments. First up is the MABAR-72 High Energy Beam Rifle, the primary ranged weapon of the Impulse, and is an enhanced version of the Lupus model beam rifle used by the Freedom and Justice Gundams. Developed using the ZGMFX-23S Savior Gundam's beam rifle as the base model. So, in other words, it's a custom of a custom model beam rifle. Its design took into account the Deuterium beam energy transfer system, and has an excellent balance of offensive power and rapid-fire capabilities. It is stored on the suit's rear skirt armor when not in use. Then we have the MMIRG-59V Mobile Shield. This is the primary defensive armament of the Impulse. This physical anti-beam coated shield can be mounted on the left forearm or handheld. It is normally in a collapsed form and can expand when required. Whether the shield is used in its collapsed or expanded state depends on the combat situations and which silhouette is in use. The basic Impulse Gundam uses the shield in its expanded state. So now we'll move on to the Silhouette Flyer's weapons, which do count as optional armaments, since the machine is a multimodal mobile suit. So first up is the Alpha Force Silhouette's weapon options. It's just a pair of the MAM-941 Vajra model beam saber. This pair of beam sabers grant the Force Impulse better close combat capabilities than the normal Impulse, and serves as its main close combat weapon. Developed from the Lacerda model of beam sabers used by the Freedom and Justice Gundams. This model of beam saber is used across the second stage series machines. Then we have the Beta Sword Silhouette. So we have the MMI-710 Excalibur model anti-ship laser sword. These swords are large physical swords with a laser blade along their cutting edge, and as their name implies, they can be used to destroy ships in space and naval ships on Earth, although they are mostly used against mobile suits during combat. The 2 swords can be joined at their hilts to form a large dual-bladed ambidextrous form. The swords are also capable of extending the laser blade over the tip of the sword for piercing enemies with phase shift armor. And the RQM-60 Flash Edge series Beam Boomerang. These are throwing weapons that emit a short beam blade on one end and can return to the owner after throwing, often catching enemy units by surprise. They are an improved version of the Justice Gundam's beam boomerangs. And finally, we have the Gamma Blast silhouette. So first we have the M2000F Kerberos model high-energy long-range beam cannon. They are mounted on the sides of the Blast silhouette pack and swing underneath the Impulse's shoulders when used. While each cannon has a retractable handle on the outer side, it is not necessary for the handle to be held to fire the weapon. Then we have the GMF-39 type quadruple missile launcher. A pair of 4-tube missile launchers swing over the shoulders when used and can fire multiple AGM-141 Firefly series guided missiles. Due to their position, the missile launchers cannot be used at the same time as the Kerberos high-energy long-range beam cannon. Next, we have the MAM-80 Defiant model beam javelin. These beam javelins are primarily used for close combat, but can also be used as throwing weapons. And finally, we have the MMIM-16XE2 Deluge series hypervelocity rail cannon. These rail cannons fire solid projectiles that have been accelerated via electromagnetic fields. This brings an end to the tech specs. Now onto the conclusion. So, while I'm not a huge fan of the Impulse Gundam's gimmicky modular layout, the machine itself is pretty decent. It mirrors the role of the Gundam Mark II in the Universal Century. So, I'll just do the individual assessments of the machine equipped with each of the silhouette flyers. So, first up is the Alpha Force Silhouette Impulse, the Zaft counterpart to the Ale Strike Gundam, a complete spec for spec copy. While it does have better performance than the Ale Strike Gundam in a lot of areas, having the same characteristics and loadout but better performance thanks to the advancements in mobile suit technology in the 2 years during its development. That's really all there is to it. My main critique about this silhouette was that the only armament equipped to this module was a pair of beam sabers. While this silhouette emphasizes speed and mobility in space and Earth's atmosphere, the machine's arsenal is severely lacking. A beam rifle, a pair of combat knives, a shield, a pair of beam sabers, and a pair of CIWS guns. While reasonably balanced, it lacks stopping power when you think of the loadouts found on some of the mass production machines being fielded by both sides and the Orb Union. And between you and me, I don't think it would be too hard to install the beam sabers on one of the main module flyers. This was just strange. At this point, a Windam has a better loadout than this Gundam without any striker packs equipped. The Windam's own high-mobility striker pack, the Jet Striker, has several missile clusters to give it more options in combat. But I'll stop there with the Windam. That machine deserves its own video in the future. But back to the Force Impulse. Because of its basic armaments, the machine is mostly suited to just perform shoot and block maneuvers using its speed and maneuverability to better position itself to target enemies and evade enemy fire. The beam sabers do come in clutch for melee attacks in combination with the speed and maneuverability offered by the Force silhouette. So it does perform quite well in these basic styles of combat. But this configuration of the Impulse is heavily restricted to only these two rudimentary forms of tactics. The beam rifle, while powerful and efficient, cannot compete with some of the other energy weapons equipped onto its siblings in range and destructive power. For instance, the second stage series machines that use the X-20 series frames like the Savior and Chaos are also quite formidable in speed, acceleration, and maneuverability. So, from just the specs, the Force Impulse falls off here, especially if it were to fight the Savior with its powerful long-range arsenal and highly maneuverable mobile armor mode. Next is the Beta Sword Impulse Gundam. So this machine is Zaft's version of the Sword Strike Gundam, a heavy close-quarters combat mobile suit configuration. The Sword Impulse has 2 anti-ship laser swords and 2 beam boomerangs added to the base Impulse Gundam's arsenal. The 2 anti-ship laser swords can combine into an ambidextrous mode. The point of this is to use the mass of these swords accelerated by the Impulse's handling of these weapons to add more force to the blows inflicted on the target or targets. Increasing its anti-armor capabilities, these swords come with a laser emitter track on one edge while the other is a solid blade, which means that these swords can be used in situations where beam weapons are unfavorable. In addition, the Sword Impulse has its beam boomerangs as an excellent mid-range option that could catch enemy units off guard on its return trajectory, and could be used as handheld beam blades as the situation calls for. While I could admit that it is an improvement over the Sword Striker from a weapons perspective, The machine hasn't addressed the main issue with machines equipped with such large anti-ship beam swords. And that's their speed. The impulse, like the strike, relies solely on the motile force generated by the actuator network in its legs to move with some assistance from its relatively conservative thruster array. That's a death sentence for any machine that was heavy CQC spec'd. Mobility is key in this kind of machine setup, and the sword impulse lacks that speed. Not to mention, I fail to see the merit in such large, conspicuous weapons. An enemy pilot would either have to be caught off guard from a blind spot, or be completely inept to get slashed by such large, cumbersome weapons. Especially when an agile enemy with a beam saber can be a huge threat to it, where it waits for the sword impulse to execute the blow. The enemy will evade and then strike when the impulse is trying to reposition the anti-ship sword for another attack attempt. This weapon only works against large targets like battleships, which is where they were mostly used. Any pilot worth their salt would be able to evade these large weapons with ease. It's only if there were a large number of enemies in a confined space that these weapons would even be able to be used as anti-mobile suit weapons. Supplementing the use of the swords with the beam boomerangs and beam rifle is the most logical approach. But it doesn't fix the mobility problem. The Gaia has a far better setup for heavy CQC, using its wing-mounted beam blades instead of the anti-ship swords. Not only does the Gaia have the necessary speed, but it also has incredible agility and weapons to complement such a style with its beam assault cannons and beam rifle, with its mobile armor mode just adding to its overall effectiveness in CQC engagements. And if there was a need for the selection of a mobile suit with the characteristics found on the Sword Impulse Gundam, then I humbly direct your attention to the GATX 133 Sword Calamity Gundam. It has a better arsenal balance and doesn't have the lack of mobility the Sword Impulse Gundam. And of course, the cool feature that its anti-ship swords could also be used as laser guns. Then next up is the Gamma Blast Impulse Gundam. Personally, this is the best improvement to the original Strike's artillery setup. Twice the firepower. Fixed the mobility problem found on the Strike's version of this artillery concept. And had a nifty beam javelin for CQC. Sure, the machine cannot fly, but being able to hover over land and sea at high speeds is plenty good enough. And it had a weapon for most situations. Railguns, missiles, beam cannons, and the base Impulse Gundam's own weapons. The machine is also reasonably fast in space. I can't find anything wrong with this configuration, but that's only in comparison to the Strike's artillery layout. The Abyss has a better selection of weapons, and even though the machine is amphibious, its artillery support fire and ranged combat capabilities surpasses the Blast Impulse. If you want a better in-depth explanation, I encourage you to check out the mech analysis videos I did of these machines if you haven't already. So, to sum up everything here, while each of the three main configurations used in the anime have some cool features, the Impulse Gundam and its Silhouette Flyer system is a pale mimicry of the capabilities of its four other second-stage series siblings. A veritable jack-of-all-trades, master of none. I know that there are some anime where the jack-of-all-trades characters are more powerful than the specialized ones, but that definitely isn't the case here. And I'm not counting the silhouettes in the side stories and spin-off manga, like the ones directly based on the Chaos, Gaia, and Abyss. But, personally, the Blast Impulse Gundam is the clear winner in terms of improvement to the original Striker packs used by the Strike. But even so, the Impulse Gundam as a whole is a respectable unit. But I just question the need for a machine with such bare-bones features at that point in time. More on that in a bit. So now onto its weaknesses. Firstly, and probably the most easily recognizable one, this machine requires far too much resource investment where it needs a dedicated catapult for it to be deployed. Not to mention, while being modular might make it easier to perform maintenance, just where are the spare flyers stored for them to be deployed at a moment's notice in battle? Doesn't that mean that a large section of the ship houses these spare units on a revolving mechanism attached to the catapult? And why just have one core Splendor unit? Personally, I can't see them having more than 3 copies of each of the main flyers and maybe a spare for each silhouette flyer. And that's not including the spare parts they need to store for the machine's maintenance, in addition to the other mobile suits on board. I'm well aware that the Impulse Gundam isn't the first machine to use a modular setup. But, even so, not a single machine that uses this modular gimmick relied more heavily on plot armor than the Impulse Gundam. You want my reasoning? Gladly. In the middle of an active battlefield, when the impulse is already deployed and in combat, since the machine would immediately combine within the vicinity of the Minerva before heading out to fight enemies. This is clearly for safety and successful docking. But then in the middle of that same active war zone, you are sending out an unmanned flyer to supplement the impulse in some way, and clearly assuming that it would not be shot down by either enemy forces, or even just by a stray shot. And as if that wasn't enough, where, pray tell, does the impulse get the breathing room to perform all of the mid-air? Mid-combat equipment changes in the middle of enemy fire. I know people love Shin, but he's not skilled enough to do all of that. Nobody is. Not even Kira or Athrin. Especially when it was just him and Athrin intercepting with the two Zakus defending the ship. And Athrin was just tying up the Chaos Gundam most of the time. So that leaves Shin by his lonesome with the usual cannon fodder. But even cannon fodder should have some skill. At least that's what I want to say. But the plot armor was so thick that in several instances, even when the impulse was surrounded by Windams in a conical formation, and firing at him in the center, that not a single beam hit the machine. The impulse is a good machine, but it's clearly not powerful enough when considering that the enemy forces managed to surround the machine. The key here is to break out before they complete the formation, because once an enemy force has completely surrounded you, it means the Reaper is calling for you. There is absolutely no way to come out of that unscathed. Yet lo and behold, not only did the machine survive, it wiped out the 30 or so Windams that had encircled it. These guys are worse than stormtroopers. It's not just that one time either. There were several instances where the machine should have been heavily damaged or destroyed, but it miraculously wasn't. I'll put another example. When it was attacking the ships with the sword impulse configuration in the Battle of Crete, there were literally two Murasames in key positions in front and behind it on a single small battleship, and they missed the impulse right in front of them, and they both got downed by it instead. Or a better example would be the fight against Alliance forces off the coast of Orb, when the machine was fighting the Zamzaza mobile armor. The machine had enough time to give itself a quick recharge and swap out damaged parts. What the hell was the mobile armor doing? The thing did have powerful beam cannons and other ranged weapons, so firing one of these weapons when the impulse was sitting still for a few seconds for the recharge should have been enough to destroy it, or at least stop the impulse from replenishing itself. It's clear that the plot armor and convenient dumbing down of characters were key to making this machine so successful. At least Seed's fights were made believable. But there's no effort here. I want to put one final example, and you guys tell me in the comments if what I'm saying is making sense. Let's say you were the one in the Chaos Gundam during the Armory 1 thefts. And when you were supporting the Gaia Gundam by dealing with a Zaku that was giving it a hard time, only to be hit with some missiles by a small fighter jet flying past you. After which it started inexplicably performing an air show for you. Would you or would you not aim and fire your beam rifle at the thing clearly forming a mobile suit above you? Or what about those large missile pods on your back? Or your Dragoon pods? Would you not fire them instead of looking up at the spectacle like a moron? The Impulse not only has the VPS armor system, it also has the PC armor system. PC is short for plot convenience, by the way, but moving on now. Personally, while I have nothing bad to say about the Impulse purely as a mobile suit, there were some things that were confusing about this machine as a whole. For starters, according to the materials, the Impulse was designed to give an ace pilot the optional equipment to deal with certain combat scenarios, to mimic the Strike's concept. But there are some stark differences between the Impulse and the Strike. The Impulse uses its silhouettes to allow its pilot to be a one-man wrecking crew. At least that was Zaf's justification for the machine's development. But the Strike had two distinct reasons for its own striker packs. While the Strike can use these striker packs in a solo capacity, the Strike was supposed to use its striker packs to outfit it with the equipment necessary to supplement its teammates in group tactics. Mainly the other 4G project prototypes, if it needs to run interference with high-speed attacks using the Ale Striker. It could aid the Aegis Gundam in this role, or be used as a distraction for the Blitz Gundam to get close to enemies without being detected using its Mirage colloid. If it needs to run hot and heavy CQC alongside the dual Gundam, it would use the Sword Striker. If there's a need for more artillery support, then equipping the Launcher Striker to support the Buster Gundam is the play. The strike works in conjunction with other machines. Ideally, anyway, since the machine was supposed to be piloted by a natural, but Kira turned it into Zaft's greatest nightmare during the First Alliance Plant War. But back to the support aspect. This applies back to the fundamental combat doctrine of the Alliance forces, which are composed of naturals, which need to use group tactics to gain the edge against the physically superior coordinators. But now onto the second reason for the Striker Pack concept, and that is to allow the Earth Alliance to quickly collect combat data on different combat styles, equipment setups, and applicable tactics using mobile suits, which were a new concept to them at that point in time. And now onto the main confusion about the Impulse's silhouette flyers. Was there really a point to them? I don't think so. The silhouette options available are way too limited, rigid, and specific to certain combat scenarios. Even with the option to switch them mid-combat, which has its own problems with package delivery in an active battlefield. It's one thing when it was early in the development of mobile suits, and these could be used to collect combat data for better machines and equipment to be developed later. Like how I explained with the Strike and its combat data being used to fast-track the Strike Dagger's introduction and deployment during the First Alliance Plant War. But this is the Second Alliance Plant War, with plenty of advanced mobile suits and equipment that didn't use such basic and situational loadouts. In addition, there were already machines that used Omnipacks. Omnipacks are just what I call striker packs that were installed with a multitude of weapons for different scenarios, improving combat versatility and survivability of its equipped mobile suits. Such Omnipacks would be like the IWSP, the Noir Striker, and the Otori Striker used by the Strike Gundam's descendants. And even Zaft disparaged the Impulse's concept of a silhouette for every situation when they developed the Destiny silhouette. Another Omnipack, or rather an Omni silhouette. So why not just design an Omni silhouette in the first place? Zaft already had more than enough data from numerous mobile suits and the development data from their first-generation Gundams. It's baffling. But I guess the writers for Destiny wanted to invoke nostalgia since the story was pretty poorly done. I'm sorry this video took so long. I never imagined the Impulse Gundam video would take so much time. Now I'm actually worried for the Strikes video I was planning in the future. But in any case, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, so I'll end the video here. Till next time, bye.